Hello students, welcome to today's chemistry class. I hope you're all set for the chemistry class with a lot of energy, just like how chemical reactions bubble themselves. Okay, so in today's class, we will actually get into the main topic of this chapter, that is trends in the periodic table, trends in the modern periodic table. Recalling in the last class, we have studied about the different blocks of the periodic table. You have S block, P block, D block and F block, their electronic configurations and their properties, which are very important to be noted. Okay. So today, let us continue with the chapter, that is trends in the periodic table. Okay. So there are different trends where you have physical properties, okay, and also with the chemical properties. So first, let us start with the physical properties for today. Now, when you talk about the physical property, the first one which you have is atomic size. We are going to deal with the first one, that is atomic size. Okay. Now, when you just see this word, correct, atomic size, you just mean that it is the size of an atom. Size of an atom is actually calculated as the distance from the nucleus to the outermost shell. This is what you have studied in your previous classes. So, it is the distance from the center that is nucleus, to the outermost shell of an atom. Okay, that is atomic size in a simple way. Now, if you just try finding the size of a single atom, you know that the size of an atom is really small. Okay, it is around 1.2, okay, into 10 to the power minus 10 meter, which is really small. Minus 10 in the sense, you imagine how tiny it must be, right? So when you have to find the size of this small atom, it is practically difficult, right? It is impossible, I can tell you. So what do we do? First of all, it is small in size, and the second part is they don't have a clear boundary. If you just see, okay, through different methods, they really don't have a particular boundary. We say there are shells and all, but when you see it practically, you don't find that exact boundary till where have we to find the distance. No, it is not possible. So what do? We try with the spectroscopic methods like X-rays and all. We use spectroscopic methods and then find out the distance from the nucleus at the center to the outermost shell, okay, by using these spectroscopic methods. Now when you have to do this, okay, when you have to find the distance, you usually take the atoms in the combined state. When the two atoms are combined, it is easier to find the distance rather than the single atom present. So the size will grow bigger, right? It will be much larger when compared to a single atom. So it is very easy for us to identify the distance. Okay? So usually it is always the distance between the atoms, it is in the combined state. If it is in the combined state, then it is very easy for us to find the atomic size. Okay, now combined state in the sense there can be covalent bonding, there can be ionic bond, there can be metallic bond, different bonds might be there. So here, first of all, you have something called as covalent radii. Covalent radii in the sense there are two atoms which form a diatomic molecule. For example, diatomic molecules are H2, Cl2, O2, which shares electrons and forms a covalent bond. So these are the examples for the covalent diatomic molecules, correct? So diatomic in the sense two atoms, same atoms will be present, two atoms will be present. Now here you see that, suppose for the example of covalent radii if I take, I told you they should be always in the combined state. Now if you take this example, now imagine you have two chlorine atoms which form a diatomic molecule by forming a covalent bond. Okay, so they have formed a bond. That's why they, overlap themselves and form a bond over here. Now it is very easy for us to identify the distance. Now what do? We take the distance between the two atoms, okay, the two nuclei, okay, distance between the two nuclei of the atoms, and then if we make the half of it, total distance we find out between the two nuclei of the atoms, and then we make the half of it, you get the radius, correct? So, you can find out the radius of a single atom by taking the distance between the two nuclei, okay, of the two different atoms. So, here when it is formed with covalent bonds, then it is called as covalent radii. For the diatomic molecules, when you take the distance and make the half of it, that becomes the covalent radii. For example, you have the Cl2 molecule. Okay, so here the distance was actually 198 picometer. Picometer in the sense it is 10 to the power minus 12 meter. Okay, so here you have 10 to the power minus 12. How much? 198. The total distance would be. Imagine this was fluorine molecule. The total distance would have been 198 picometer. But when you have to take the radius, you take the half of it. So half would be how much? 99 picometer. So you get the radius of a particular atom of fluorine. Got it? So this is how you find the covalent radii. So covalent radii is the half of the distance between the distance of the two nuclei of the atoms. Okay. So when you take the half of it, you get the radius. Where? Only in the covalently bonded atoms. That's why you call them as covalent radii. Covalent radii. Okay. So second one, if you see, that is metallic radii. Sometimes you also can find the atoms present, size of an atom present in the metal. Now you know that if you have a copper metal, okay, in the copper metal it is like an entity. Entity in the sense there are many copper atoms which forms a big cluster. Okay, so when you have to find the radii of the metallic atom, what do? We take the adjacent two atoms. There are many atoms present which forms a cluster, correct? There is an entity. Entity in the sense there are many atoms. So what do? We take the two adjacent atoms and then identify the distance. Like the same way we did it for covalent radii. What do? We take the total distance between the two nuclei of the atoms and then make the half of it, which gives the radii. So when it is done in the metals between two adjacent metal atoms, then it becomes a metallic radii. Now for example, you have copper metal. The adjacent atoms, the distance between the two adjacent atoms will be 256 picometer. But when you make the half of it, you get the size of one single copper atom, which becomes 128 picometer. Very simple to understand. If it is covalently bonded, you call it as covalent radii. How? By taking the half of the distance between the two nuclei. Okay. Whereas in the metals, it is metallic radii. Okay. And then talking about the noble gases, first of all, you all know they are monoatomic. They are always having a single atom, and they are also present in the gaseous state. Very stable too. So when they are present in the gaseous state, don't you think they don't get bonded? First of all, they are stable, so they don't get bonded with other atoms. So here, if you see here, these are the two atoms of the noble gases. They don't combine themselves, okay, but they will be in the gaseous state and they will be far away from each other. But you know that, in any of the atoms, okay, in any of the atomic species, there is some force of attraction between them. Some force of attraction also might be there. Slightly some force of repulsion would also be there. But they have a slight force of attraction, which is also called as van der Waals force of attraction. Van der Waals. This is a name of the scientist. It is a type of bond, okay, wherein the atoms will be far away from each other, but they have a slight force of attraction. So this is called as van der Waals force. So noble gases will have this van der Waals force. First of all, they are in the gaseous state. They are also stable and they are far away from each other. So the radii would be large enough. Okay, we can't find it exactly, precisely, but there is an approximate value. There might be errors, few errors, but the radii of the noble gases is said to be very large enough. Okay, I hope this part is clear. So for the finding of the atomic size, you actually take the distance of the two nuclei of the atoms and then make the half of it, which gives you the radii. When it comes to covalently bonded atoms, it is covalent radii. If it comes to the metal atoms, then it is metallic radii. If it is noble gases, the size of the radius is very large enough as they are present in the gaseous state, and also they have some slight force of attraction wherein you can take the distance, and that is why their radius is said to be larger. Hope this is clear. What is atomic size? Got to know. How do you find it out? So usually it is done by spectroscopic methods. Now let us move on to the trends in the atomic size. How does it vary in the periodic table? So first we start with along the period. Along the period, if you see, suppose you have lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine. So these are the elements present in which group? They Which group? They are in the second group, correct? So lithium, beryllium, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that. So here, when you try plotting a graph, or there is a variation of the graph wherein atomic radius is being plotted, okay, each atomic radius is being plotted, and with the atomic number, it is compared with the atomic number. So when this is done, you see that the graph from the starting of the group, that is lithium, okay, which comes in S dot, then you see that there is slight decrease in the values, correct? Atomic radii decreases as you come along the period. Now let us move into that. What is it exactly? Then I'll come to the graph. Now you see here along the period you have lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, all these elements. You see that the nuclear charge increases. Now first of all, what do you mean by this nuclear charge? It is the force of attraction between the protons present in the nucleus and the electrons present in the outermost shell. Suppose you have protons here and you have electrons. The force of attraction between these two is called as nuclear charge. So when you say nuclear charge increases, that means there is more force of attraction. If you say nuclear charge decreases, that means there is less force of attraction. Now when you go along the period, okay, how do you write the electronic configuration for lithium? You write it as 1s2, 2s1. Correct? Then beryllium you have 1s2, 2s2. Then next you have 1s2, 2s2, 2p1. Then you have 2p2, 2p3. So as you go along the period, you see that to the same valence shell in the sense the outermost shell, okay, the electrons are being added. It will be in the same shell, but the electrons keep adding up. Correct? Now when you say that electrons keep adding up, many number of electrons, okay, 2p1, 2p2, 2p3, so till 6 it goes on along the period. So when you keep adding up the electrons, the number of electrons are always equal to number of protons. Correct? So number of protons also increases as you keep on adding the electrons. Now what happens? The force of attraction, the power of the nucleus becomes really high, and then they start attracting each other. So there is increase in the nuclear charge, we say. Okay? As there is force of attraction is more, what do we say? The nuclear charge increases due to the addition of the electrons in the same valence shell. That you should remember. In the same valence shell only you are going to add more and more electrons. So nuclear charge increases and the atomic radii decreases, which means that when you have more force of attraction between these, or nuclear charge increases, what happens to the size? The pull from the nucleus also increases. So what happens? The size automatically starts shrinking slowly. So if you keep on adding more and more electrons, the nuclear charge increases in the same valence shell itself. So what happens? The size shrinks. So what happens to the atomic radii? It decreases. Hope this is clear. So nuclear charge increases, atomic radii decreases because the electrons are being added in the same valence shell. Okay, very nice. If you imagine this, then you can easily write down the answers. Okay, so please make points of this, very important. Okay, trends in the modern periodic table. Let us see down the group now, downwards. Now, if you just see the first group, that is alkali metals, you have lithium, sodium, potassium, okay, rubidium, cesium and francium. Now, if you see downwards, okay, what happens? You write the electronic configurations for them as, starting from lithium, you have the outermost electrons in the valence shell, that is 2s1. Then you have 3s1 for sodium. Then you have 4s1 for potassium. So, in this way, different shells are being added up, or different valence shells are being formed there. Different newly balanced shell, new valence shell keeps on increasing there. Correct? 2s1, 3s1, 4s1, which means new valence shells are being added. So down the group when you come, can you tell me what happens to the atomic radii? If the valence shells are being added, so you start from 1s1, okay, one valence shell. Then again you start with 2s1, then 3s1, 4s1. So what happens? The valence shell increases. Now what happens to the atomic size? As the valence shell increases, correct, the radii also increases. But there is some change in the nuclear charge also. There is increase in nuclear charge too, when you keep on adding the electrons to the different valence shells. Valence shell increases, obviously the size also increases, but there is some pull from the nucleus. But what happens is, when you have to fill these 3s1. So what happens here, you see that the inner electrons are being filled, they are stable. They are almost fully filled, correct, 2s2, 2p6. So they are already filled. Outermost electron will be in the last one, that is 3s shell. So inner electrons, okay, these inner electrons, if suppose here it is 3s1, these inner electrons will act like a shield for them. They act like a screen. So they avoid the attraction between the nucleus and the outermost electrons or outermost shell. Okay, so they shield the valence electrons from attracting the nucleus. Got it? So as they shield these force of attraction, what happens to the size? Obviously they will be far away from the nucleus, and that is why the size also keeps on increasing, and hence the atomic radii also increases. Did you all get it? So along the period, what happens? The electrons are being added to the same shell, so nuclear charge increases, so size will shrink. But down the group, what happens? The new valence shells are being added. So here the inner electrons which are present, so suppose here 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, all these shells will start shielding the outermost electrons from attracting the nucleus. So obviously the atomic radii increases. So I hope this is clear along the period and down the group. So next we have the trend that is about the ionic radii. Okay. So this was about the atomic radii. So I hope this is clear. So we should move on to the next one. So next we start with the ionic radii. Now what do you mean by this ionic radii? Just look at this term, ionic radii. Ions are nothing but charged particles. So charged particles are formed by an element whenever they lose or gain electrons, right, in order to become stable. Now the one which loses electrons are termed as cation, which has a positive charge, and the one which has gaining of electrons, when the one which gains electrons are called as anions, which are negatively charged. So the distance between the cation and an anion in an ionic crystal. Now suppose you have sodium chloride that is formed by an ionic bond. So you have a cation and an anion. So both of these, the distance between the both of these nuclei, okay, that gives you the half of it. Distance between the nuclei of the two atoms, that is cation and an anion, make a half of it, which gives you the radius, that becomes the ionic radii. Is this clear? Just like how you have the atomic radii, in the same way this is for ions. You take the half of the distance between the nuclei of the two ions here. Okay, in an ionic crystal you see. Now, if you just consider an element that is sodium, which has an atomic number 11, how do you write the electronic configuration? You write it as 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, 3s1, which has one electron in the outermost shell, one valence electron. Now, this actual atom has a size of 186 picometer. Okay, but when you consider the ion, okay, ion has a radii of 95 picometer. It has a radius of 95 picometer. Why? How this has become Na plus over here? This has lost an electron. By losing an electron, it has formed a sodium cation, a positive ion. Okay, Na plus 1. How? By losing one electron. So the radius would be 95 picometer. Now when you compare these two, the size of the ion, which ion is this? This is a positive ion. This is called as cation. The size of the cation is said to be very less when compared to its own atom. Don't you think so? So here, size of a cation is always smaller than its own atom. Always remember. Why? Because you have lost one electron. It has lost an electron. Okay. So what happens? The number of electrons in the valence shell has been decreased. First of all, it has less number of electrons now. If it was 3s1 in the outermost shell, that electron is being lost over there. So it has less number of electrons, correct? Now what happens then? If it has less number of electrons, the power of the nucleus becomes really high. So what happens from the nucleus? It starts attracting the electrons present in their outermost shells. So the outermost would be which one now? 2p6. First of all, it has less number of electrons, then the power of the nucleus would be more. Then obviously the nuclear charge is going to increase here. It would be the same, but the power of charged nucleus becomes really high and it starts attracting, so the size also becomes really small. So the size of the cation is always smaller than its atom. So whenever you talk about cation, you should always remember it tries to lose electrons. When it tries to lose electrons, obviously there is less number of atoms present, so the power of the nucleus is more, and hence the size, the attraction is also more, and the size shrinks. So the size of the cation is always smaller than that of its atom. That's why you have Na, that atom would have 186 picometer, but when it has lost electrons, the attraction is more, the size is less, so you have 95 picometer, half of it. Okay. So next, you have the size of an anion. Size of an anion is larger than its own atom. Now, when you spoke about the cation, it is losing of electrons. So the number of valence shell also will decrease. When you talk about an anion, what happens here? One or more electrons are being added there. If you imagine, here fluorine atom has 64 picometer. But when an electron is being added, how many electrons are added? F minus 1 electron is being added to it. So what happens to the size here? 136 picometer, which is a great increase in the ionic radii, correct? So when you add up an electron, it may add up in the next valence shell, correct? Or when you add more of electrons to a particular atom, okay, when you add more electrons, when it becomes an anion, what happens there? Electron repulsion will be more. The electrons, they start repelling between different shells. Suppose you imagine here these two shells. If you have an electron extra added over here, these start repelling. These electrons will start repelling from each other, and obviously the attraction also will become lesser and lesser. Then the size also will expand. Remember that. Why? Mainly due to the electron repulsion between the different shells. Okay. So this is why the size of an anion expands in size, and that's why it is said to be larger than that its own atom. So here F minus will have 136 picometer, F atom is said to be really less. Okay. This is ion has more size. So always remember, cation will have a smaller size than its own atom, and anion will have the larger size. Anion in the sense you are adding electrons, cation in the sense it is losing electrons. Okay, so it gains electrons basically. Now you have something called as isoelectronic species. Isoelectronic, iso in the sense same. These are the ions or atoms which has same number of electrons. Now same number of electrons in the sense, now here you see all these 4 ions have 10 electrons. Now suppose you have O2 minus, F minus, Na plus, Mg2 plus. O2 minus in the sense oxygen is actually atomic number 8. If you add 2 minus, it becomes 10. F minus 9, it is actually, but when you add it becomes 10. Na plus, lose 1, so it becomes 10. Mg2 plus, lose 2 electrons, so it becomes 10. So it totally has 10 electrons, which makes them, similar in a way, but their ionic radii will be different because they have different nuclear charges, different radii. Okay, so here these species or the ions or the atoms which have same number of electrons are called isoelectronic species, as they have same number of electrons. Remember this, but they have different charges, they have different ions too. But they will not have the same ionic radii. Remember that. If the number of electrons are same, that doesn't mean that their ionic radii should be the same. No, it can be in different shells. They will have different nuclear charges. There is different kind of repulsions taking place. Correct? So here, let us see more into it about this. Now see here, cation with the greater charge will have greater attraction to the nucleus. Cation with the greater charge. I'll give you an example. Now here you have sodium, which has a +1 charge, and then you have magnesium, which has +2, and aluminium, which has +3. Note the sentence here. Cation with the greater charge will have greater attraction to the nucleus. Cation with the greater charge. Now when you compare these three, which has a greater charge over here? Aluminium, because it has lost 3 electrons. Okay, it has lost 3 electrons. Now what happens here when this atom has lost 3 electrons? That means there are only less number of electrons present there. Now what happens to the nuclear charge? Obviously it is going to increase, correct? Because the pull from the 3 electrons when compared to magnesium, which has lost 2 electrons, and sodium, which has lost 1 electron. So always remember, the cation with the greater charge, okay, will have greater attraction to the nucleus. Got it? As it has lost 3 electrons, which means that the number of electrons are really less enough. So what happens to the nucleus? There is more pull from the nucleus. Okay, so the size will shrink, and cation with the greater charge will have less ionic radii. Okay, smaller radii. So here when compared to these three, the one with greater charge will have a smaller radii, that becomes the aluminium ion. Clear? Next you have, next point, the opposite of it. Anions with the greater charge will have larger ionic radii. Larger ionic radii in the sense greater negative charge. Here greater positive charge, anions will have greater negative charge. Now here, when you talk about this, now example, for example, if I take O2 minus and F minus, oxygen 2 minus and F minus, which has a greater charge? O2 minus. Because it is gaining 2 electrons. F is only gaining 1 electron. Now which has more charge when compared to fluorine? That is oxygen. So oxygen will have a greater radii. As it has gained 2 electrons in compared to 1, this is more. It has gained 2 electrons, which means that in the outermost shell 2 electrons are being gained extra. So what happens then? More number of electrons are being present rather than the nucleus. Now nucleus will have less power in order to attract those electrons. Okay, so more number of electrons are there. Okay, so they overcome the attraction from the nucleus, and what happens? They start repelling between the electrons. That is, electron-electron repulsion will be there between the shells. So what happens to the size? They start increasing. So anions, whenever you add electrons, extra is being added. So remember, they will have repulsion. Electron-electron repulsion will be there, and that's why they will have a greater ionic radii. Remember this. So generally when we say this, I hope this is clear. Okay. So generally when we talk about ionic radii, they will have the same trend as per the atomic radii. Okay. Atomic radii, you saw that along the period they decrease. In the same way, ionic radii also decreases in general with the ionic radii. Okay. Along the period it decreases, same as that of atomic radii, and down the road the ionic radii increases. So I hope this is clear. What is ionic radii and what happens with the greater charge, what happens to the size of both the ions. I hope this is clear. So next we move on to the third one, that is the next trend, ionization enthalpy. So next we come to the third trend, which is very important, that is ionization enthalpy. Now you must have heard this word somewhere. We were talking about this in the S block elements. They have low ionization enthalpy, I told you. Now what is ionization enthalpy? Enthalpy is nothing but energy. Okay. Now energy required to remove an electron from the outermost shell. Now if you have sodium is written as 2,8,1. Okay. So you require some energy to remove the outermost electron. Okay. From the outermost shell of an isolated gaseous atom. So they should be in the gaseous state first of all, because if it is a solid or liquid, you require more energy to remove the forces of attraction itself. So usually you consider gaseous state and also isolated. They shouldn't be bonded to any other atom. They shouldn't be in the combined state here, in order to identify the amount of energy, the quantity of energy in order to remove the electron from the outermost shell. So who is going to put the energy? We are going to apply energy. So we supply energy. Always when an atom releases energy, you get a negative value by 2. But here you are providing energy to remove an electron. That means you are providing in the sense that the value has to be positive. So usually the ionization enthalpy is denoted as delta IH. Delta I in the sense the change in the enthalpy. Okay, enthalpy is denoted as H, and this is ionization enthalpy. Okay, so the energy required to remove an electron from the outermost shell of an isolated gaseous atom. So this is the ionization enthalpy. Now if you have an element X, okay, now if you have to remove an electron, when you obviously remove an electron, it becomes a cation. Loses. Loses means always positive, correct? So it loses one electron, so it becomes X plus. Now, removing one electron from the outermost shell of an atom is really easy. You require less energy. But if you have two electrons here, 3, 4 and so on, it requires more energy. So here, first of all, when you remove one electron from the outermost shell, it is called as first ionization enthalpy. Very easy. One electron if you're trying to remove, then it is called as first ionization enthalpy from the outermost shell. If you have to remove the second electron positive, to form a dipositive ion here, this is monopositive, one electron is being removed. If you try removing from that particular monopositive ion another electron, then it becomes a dipositive ion. So you require still more energy when compared to the first ionization energy. So why? Because these electrons will be still more bonded, no? Inside there is nuclear force of attraction, that is nuclear charge is high. So you require more energy to remove the second electron. In the same way, third will have still more energy. So the energy keeps on increasing as you move on to different electrons. So first electron, the energy required is very less. That is first ionization enthalpy. So it needs only less energy for the electron to be removed. Whereas when you go on to the second one, third one proceeding with that, you require more energy to remove an electron. Hope this is clear. So here you have element X, wherein an electron is removed, it forms a monopositive ion. So this is ionization enthalpy in a basic way. Okay, now here just look into this graph wherein the ionization enthalpy is being plotted with the increasing atomic number for the first 60 elements. Okay, so here as you can see, all these curves are having the elements between those. That is, here you start from noble gases. Actually, you start from alkali metals till noble gas. Then again you come to the second period, then noble gas. Third period, like that. Okay. So here you have the graph of the ionization enthalpy, variation of ionization enthalpy, that is energy with the increasing atomic number. Now if you see here, telling it in a very simple way, understand this properly. See here, first on the top of the peaks, you have noble gases. Okay, now you have to tell me. And in the bottom, you have alkali metals. Now, can you tell me where is the ionization energy or ionization enthalpy is more here? It is in the noble gases because it has the highest values on the top. Noble gases will have the filled electronic configuration. Now they are stable, correct? So you require more energy to remove the electrons from their shells. They are already bound there, they are stable, so you require much more energy. So what happens to the ionization enthalpy? Obviously it increases. Now when you come down to the bottom, you have alkali metals. Alkali metals will always have one electron in the outermost shell, which is much easier, I told you. If it is one electron, removal of one electron, then it is very much easy. That means they will have low ionization energy or low ionization enthalpies. So you have it at the bottom. So you have lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, all these alkali metals which requires less energy to remove one electron from the outermost shell. Then 2 would be slightly greater, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 electrons in the outermost shell becomes really difficult. It is stable. That's why you require more energy. Okay, I hope this is clear. So alkali metals will have a least value for ionization enthalpy as it has only one electron, whereas noble gases have a stable filled configuration where it becomes difficult for the removal of electrons there. Okay, so here let us see how it differs along the period and down the route. Okay, the variations, the trends along the period and down the route. Now, if you see this graph, once you start from alkali metal, the preceding noble gas is being obtained. Then you go to alkali metal. So along the period, now this is along the period, lithium to neon, then sodium to argon. All these are along the period. Now from the graph itself, you can say that from sodium to argon, it increases. The ionization enthalpy increases. So here you have another graph there, lithium to neon. What happens here? The graph keeps on increasing, which means the ionization enthalpy required to remove the electrons from the outermost shell when we reach noble gases is more. Okay, you need more energy to remove the electrons. So ionization electrons are being added in the same shell itself. So what happens to the nuclear charge? That force of attraction is more. So what happens? It is very difficult to remove an electron. So what happens? The energy required is very high. So ionization enthalpy also increases along the period. This is along the period. Down the group, if you see, what happens? The valence shell keeps on increasing, and there is also screening effect or shielding. I told you they will have the inner electrons which shields them. Okay, so here 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, 3s2, 3p6, 4s1, which is the element which is having this configuration? Potassium. Okay, potassium is an alkyl metal. Now here you have potassium. So what happens here? If you have to remove this one electron from the outermost shell, these electrons are going to shield the outermost electrons. That means they will not allow the valence electron to get attracted to the nucleus. So this particular effect is called as screening effect or shielding. They shield them. Okay. So what happens as you keep on adding the valence electrons, the valence shell also increases, and there is shielding effect which is taking place. They shield the electrons from not being attracted to the nucleus, and also the the ionization enthalpy also decreases. Very less energy, easily you can remove because there is no attraction only. Yeah, but whereas in the mirrors there is more attraction, you require more energy to remove an electron. So ionization enthalpy increases, whereas down the group you require less energy as it has only one electron, which means ionization enthalpy decreases down the group. Hope this is clear. So ionization enthalpy is the energy required to remove an electron from the outermost shell. So down the group you require less energy because the valence electrons are being added in different valence shell. The valence shell increases, and also there is screening effect. Whereas along the period there is high nuclear charge and it is difficult to remove an electron from the outermost shell. So ionization enthalpy increases, then you require more energy. Here it is less energy. Now, here is an instance, okay, just look into the graph here along the period. Now, if you see here, beryllium, the plotting of ionization enthalpy is done with the first ionization enthalpy. Only if the first ionization enthalpy is taken, the values are taken, and we have plotted the graph here. Now, if you see this graph here, beryllium has more energy when compared to boron. Actually, it should have been increased like this, correct? But you find some anomalies here. So here beryllium has more energy when compared to boron. Let's see why is this, okay? If you try writing the configuration of beryllium, the atomic number is 4. So you write it as 1s2, 2s2. Correct? Boron is 1s2, 2s2, 2p1. What is the difference you find here? You see that the next electron is being added to 2p shell, 2p orbital. How many electrons are there? One electron is being added to 2p shell. Now, 2s will have a different orbital, 2p will have a different orbital, correct? But whereas here s, it has a different one. Now you see that boron requires less energy when compared to beryllium. Less energy in the sense, why this 2p has a less energy? It is easy to remove an electron from the 2p. Why? Because these are inner electrons here, correct? They start shielding them. Remember shielding? So this will prevent the attraction from the nucleus. Okay, the nucleus of boron, it does not attract the 2p electrons when compared to these. So these will act as inner electrons and they shield them. Got it? So it is easy to remove an electron. This will act like a protection. So what happens? Easily you can remove an electron with less energy. That's why boron will have less energy. But here you see this is 2s2 which is filled. Filled requires more energy, no? It is stable already. So it requires more energy. But p, as it is a higher orbital, okay, it is a higher energy, it has higher energy. So you require only less energy because the s electrons will shield them. Okay, so that's why boron will have less energy. Did you get it? Why? Because shielding effect of these inner electrons in boron. Okay, next instance, if you see here, nitrogen has more energy when compared to oxygen. Okay, nitrogen has more energy when compared to oxygen. That means like a stripe writing the electronic configuration. Now you actually get actual use of these electronic configuration. You get to know the reactivity, you get to know the trends in the periodic table. So electronic configuration, if you know, it's very easy to understand the concept. That's why I told you to write down. Okay. So nitrogen, if you have to write, how do you write it? 1s2, 2s2, nitrogen is 7. 2p, how much 2 plus 2 is 4? 3. Correct? Oxygen is 8. So 1s2, 2s2, 2p, 4. Correct? 4 plus 2, 6, 6 plus 2, 8. Okay, proper. Now, if you see here, what's the difference here? Nothing. It is p. In p orbital you have 3 electrons. In this p orbital you have 4 electrons. P orbital has, and p subshell has 3 orbitals. Remember? Correct? So here I will write it for nitrogen. Here I will write it for oxygen. Okay? 3 orbitals. Correct? How many you can fill in p? I told you in the second class. What was it? 6 electrons. But now how many do we have for nitrogen here? Only 3 in the p. So always while filling there is something called as Hund's rule. Hund's rule, which we will be studying later on in the next chapter. Hund's rule. Okay? He says that whenever you fill the electrons in the orbitals, each orbital can take 2 electrons. So whenever you try filling them, always you have to start pairing it singly. Okay? Then you put them into pairs. First you have to always fill them singly. Okay? Only one electron first you have to fill. Then you start pairing them. Now nitrogen is given as 3 here. So you start filling 1, 2, 3. So 3 electrons are being filled. Clear? Oxygen. Oxygen, if you see, how many are there? First you have to fill singly. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 electrons are being filled. First you have to fill it singly and then start pairing it. Now here, if you see, what's the difference here? In the first orbital you have 2 electrons, but here it is all paired. I mean, it is half filled, you see. Correct? Now it is half filled, not fully filled, but it is half filled. Always remember, just make a note of it. Half filled orbitals are also said to be very stable. Just like you have fully filled noble gases, fully filled also will be stable. In the same way, half filled, exactly half filled orbitals will also be very stable. Now when it is stable, obviously it is difficult to remove electron because there is much stability there. It is difficult to remove an electron. Whereas in oxygen, easily you can remove this electron. Correct? Then it becomes stable. But here, then it is already stable, so it requires more ionization enthalpy. So nitrogen has a higher value when compared to oxygen. It is removed. It is easy to remove the electron from the oxygen. So this is what this graph says. Okay, so these two concepts, please remember, always remember that half filled configuration are always stable, and here this is due to shielding effect. Okay, I hope this is clear. The first 3 trends, very important. If you don't understand, just go through the video once again. If you have doubts, just ask me. You can WhatsApp me. Okay, other than that, you just go through. Okay, read properly, make points, and solve the worksheets too. So I'll see you in the next class. Thank you.